All right. Well, welcome to the Faith Forum podcast.
Yeah.
Um, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Okay. Well, my name is Ben Suggs. I am I'm a pastor. I'm a dad, a husband, all those things that a lot of times men forget uh, to make about their identity. I'm a lot more things than what I do, but for the purpose of what we're talking about today, I think I have been blessed to be a church planting pastor, the on the board and part of the founding of a homeless organization, a charitable organization, among other things, business owners, stuff like that. So I've got a couple plates in the air. I'm was the phrase is jack of all trades, master of none. Uh, so um, so yeah, and I love talking to people about these things, talking about how to uh, do ministry well, how to incorporate big ideas into the small parts of our lives. So,
All right. Well, so why did you go into ministry?
ooh, well, it was one of those things I never thought I would actually do. When I was a teenager, and people started saying, what it was funny. God, I think was really using people to plant this idea in my brain that and in my heart that to do ministry full time. And I believe that we all are full time ministers. If you're a Christian, you're called to be a full time minister. But for in particular, I had some opportunities to speak here and there, and had some opportunities to help with like the youth group at my church. I wasn't the youth pastor of the church I grew up in, but I was friends with the guy who was. And so when I aged out and I sort of hung around and helped a little bit, and more people would say, I think you've got some gifts and talents that God may be using. And then I got to be really good friends with the pastor of the church that I was again I'd grown up in, and he had come in when I was in high school, and we joke about how the fact we really didn't like each other at first. I was the one of those loud kids on the back pew of the church making a ruckus, and he would call us out for it, and I wasn't used to that, but we developed a really cool friendship, and I started inviting him on. I was doing a radio show on the college station where I
Oh, yeah.
went, and it was like a Christian rock radio show, and I would bring him on and ask him tough questions, or kind of take questions from the audience, and or from and that sort of turned into a really good friendship. And then when he was called into church planting, I eventually went with him and served as his youth pastor. But we had a very similar idea about doing ministry and this calling to do church for people that maybe aren't interested in churches. We're in North Carolina. There's a church on every corner. And so a lot of people are like, why do you want another church? But yeah, there's a lot of people that aren't in church. And so we kind of took that lane of ministry. And it was honestly something that through relationships and friendships, I think God stoked the fires of that in me. And so I've just sort of been along for the ride ever since.
There you go. So, um, so you went to Bible college, is that right?
I did. I did online. I
Okay.
took some classes. But it was funny. I my grandfather at the time was a big proponent of education, and I remember him going, "Are you going to go to Bible college? Are you going to be a pastor? Are you going to go to Bible college?" And I kept, he was willing. He's like, "I'll pay for you if you want to go to Bible college," because he was of the time where he was held back in his job because he didn't have enough education. And so he was a big proponent of that. But God kept telling me, no, you don't need, you're already doing ministry. You need to sort of school of hard knocks. And there's so much good information out there. So I've taken classes from different places here and there to kind of fill in some gaps. But it was really kind of my mentor, which was my friend that was the pastor of the first church I was in.
Mhm.
He took me along for the ride. It was a very Paul and Timothy type situation, and as you go, and he would give me books, and I would read books, and I would go find theology books. I mean, I've got a whole shelf over there full of the stuff that you would read in seminary, systematic
Mhm.
theology, and different things like that interest me, but I never felt like I was supposed to stop what I was doing, leave the mission field to go learn how to be in the mission field.
Yeah.
I know that's maybe just a calling for me. I don't down anybody that goes to Bible college. But
Mhm.
for the particular thing that we were doing,
Mhm.
most of my teenagers when I was a youth pastor, most of my congregation now, likes the fact that I'm not speaking in Bible college language, and one of the things I noticed is very easy, and I get this way too. And I didn't go to Bible college where I can start preaching or writing like I'm doing it to my professor rather
Yeah.
than to the layman, to the person who's worked third shift last night and came into church and is barely. And you're starting to talk about propitiation and stuff like that, and they're like, I don't even, And so putting the
Yeah.
cookies on the bottom shelf has been a big point for us in the churches that we've been in the communities we're reaching. So it's definitely it's been a kind of an as you go education. Every time I would get challenged about something, I go, I don't really know that, and so I'd go find a bunch of books and watch a bunch of videos and take a class
Mhm.
and fill in my eschatology or fill in my whatever,
Yeah.
whatever I felt like I was lacking. Um,
Mhm.
and it's been good, and I haven't had to stop doing what I was already doing.
Yeah. Have you ever read the book A Little Exercise for Young Theologians?
Ooh, no, that sounds like a book I would pick up. Like I don't know what that is, but I want it. That sounds cool. No, I've not read that.
Yeah, it basically goes through all the pitfalls of someone who goes to Bible college or seminary and then comes home, and
Yeah.
the church is like, why are they ruined?
Yes, yes. Yeah, that is what I've seen a lot, and that's part of I know that's an anecdotal thing, but I've seen a lot of pastors and youth pastors be really excited and seem to really have dynamic relationships and a calling, and then they go to Bible college and it's all up here now, and
Yeah,
it's just and they're like, oh, you were preaching better before you went to Bible college. So yeah, that's that. I would definitely probably I might pick that book up because that at least makes me feel a little bit better, because it is tough sometimes when you
yeah,
go in pastoral circles and they're like, in my years at Southeastern Seminary, and I'm like, oh, I went to community college. I don't, you know. So yeah, but that's kind of my mentality too. Is like, hey, I don't want to tempt myself to be condescending and to be. God has provided a pretty great education for me in my relationships and in the content that's out there.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, so
So, so then, out of high school, you went to plant a church?
it took a few years. I went to broadcasting school. Like I said, I was telling you about the radio show. I went in for TV and radio, and actually worked in the business for a few years. But it was during that time, right? I was going into college, and I had grown up in the church, but I really didn't get saved until I was like 18 and made it a serious business. It was like I always look back at that time where I was like, I was baptized when I was 13, but I was just doing that so our family could join the church, but I got saved at 18 and spent the next, it was about 5 years. 2008 was a big year for me because I'd finished college, I got married, and then we started. I helped start a church there at the end of 2008. So yeah, but it was a part of the. It didn't come straight out, but it was pretty close to. And I was the youth pastor, and I was still doing part-time work. I'd started a DJ company because in college I learned how to DJ, so I was doing weddings on the side, and which was fun, and it's continue to do it. Not as much now, but as my sort of kingdom building job, my tent making job, that affords me a lot of cool opportunities to meet people that don't know I'm a pastor, and I can get a gauge on their heart, and then have the chance to share Jesus. Um, but yeah, so I started out of high school, went to college for a few years, got my broadcasting degree, And I actually had to make a decision because about the time that my friend was starting this church and kind of asking if I wanted to help, with no promise of a full. We were totally independent. There was no big church backing or anything. We were as organic as it gets. And I remember at the time, I also had some job prospects. I was working for a decently popular, actually really popular heritage top 40 radio station in our area, and the boss was like, "Hey, I can probably put in the good word." And there was some jobs at the beach. I was about to go be a radio guy at the beach, and God's like, "But no, I want you to be a part of this humble church plant in this little bump in the road town." So I went from kind of made that decision there, and started moving away from doing, you know, broadcasting and stuff professionally and into the church world.
Okay. So when you went to go be a youth pastor, did you have funding or were you just going for it?
It was the God was at our backs, but there was not much in our wallets. um, it was very it was very organic. It was we rented an American Legion building, like AF or VFW type place. There's a big old World War II tank out the front. When we were in town. We're like, we're at the tank. We're at the big tank, and oh, okay, I know where you are. And we just rented out this building, and put up these old rusty, crusty metal chairs. It was one of those buildings that wood paneling from the 1970s, and we hung up a bed sheet, and I had this big clunky projector that I had bought secondhand off of one of my DJ buddies, and we would play in the infancy of YouTube. We would play music videos because we didn't have a worship leader, and I set up my DJ mixer over to the side and would play music and work his microphone, and that was pretty much it. And so then we started. Yeah, I kind of helped facilitate, and then as teenagers came into our fellowship, I started, I think the summer of the next year, 09 was the first, went to summer camp and that type of thing, and started an official youth ministry. But it was very, we did what we could. We didn't know how many tithers we would have. We knew it was his family and my family, and that was pretty much it. We had some folks that knew us, but we were in an area kind of removed from where we were from, and so we sort of had to start building relationships there. But it was nice to be able to also start over, and not have everybody who thought they knew us, or is a prophets never wanted in his hometown. I wasn't a bad kid, but I was the class clown. I was the silly guy in high school, and so to hear me try to tell you about Jesus, it took a while for people to kind of get over that idea. So it was good for me to be able to go, and I'm not just the hooligan, running around the church, when I wasn't supposed to be. That God was actually used to be for good things now.
Yeah. So is that the church you've been at for the past 15 years?
Yes, yes and no. So we were in 2017. Or 2016 and 2017, we started kind of rolling off and planting churches out of the church that I had helped plant in 08. And so in 2017, my wife and I and our family and some from our original, I call them the mothership. So I took some from the mothership, and then there was also, I had some pre-existing relationships and friendships in this area, because we were just enough out of the area when we planted it first that it's funny, 10 minutes down the road, the people in that town don't go to this town. It was like different worlds. And so, but when we started this church, and it was essentially a campus of that church at first, and it was very much, I liken it to a kid growing up and moving out of the house as our progression, as a relationship. At first, we were very dependent. We all used the same money, and everything went to that. We had the same leadership team. We even synchronized sermons, and where the elders and the campus pastors would sit down and come up with a sermon series or a sermon topic and get kind of the big ideas, and then say, okay, I'm going to preach this one for the town of Liberty. You preach that one for the town of Siler City. And it, and we would have, but the more we progressed, the more we got independent. And so eventually, about I think it's probably 3 or 4 years after we first planted, we became, I think we were financially independent really in about 2 or 3 years. And then we were more and more, we kind of became independent on paper with our own bylaws and our own leadership and stuff like that about 2021 or 2022. And so that was so now we're our own church, and we have an affiliation. We share a name with the mothership, and obviously I have lots of existing and lasting relationships with them. I go up there and preach every once in a while when needed, but also we realize that we're kind of our own congregation, and our leadership leads our people, and vice same thing for them.
Okay, cool. So what led you to start your nonprofit?
Oh, that's a good question. So it's one of those things where I don't know if you've read the book Experiencing God by Richard and Henry Blackaby. It's a really good book, and we had a group of men, some from our church and some from just other churches that we had some that would like come to our community prayer time. We were reading this book, and one of the big themes that the Blackabys drive home is, if you want to experience God, you find out where He's moving and you join Him. It's not, God, I want to do this. Will you rubber stamp this big picture idea, this big scheme of mine? And it's nothing wrong. He said nothing wrong with dreaming, but if you want God, if you want a supernatural move of God, if you want to really just have one of those situations where God's hand is all over it, find where there's already a need, or where there's already something happening, and really just put your back into it. And so we were talking about that. We're like, what does that look like? And what we had noticed around the same time is we started to hear more conversations. This was I think right during COVID, because 2020 was the year it kind of came together, and we launched the nonprofit the first day of 2021 officially on paper. But we had started to realize that there was a growing need in our community. We're small town that's growing. The demographics have changed over the last 20-30 years, but a lot of the mentalities maybe not necessarily have. And we saw that there were they were not expecting the type of help that people would need. And we started seeing more people hungry, more people homeless, not like big city numbers where you go to the big city shelters and there's just homeless. Charlotte, we visited a Charlotte shelter, and it's just like, man, there's a lot of homeless people. And but we're a small town, but per capita there was more than we were used to, let's just say that. And people knocking on our door. Once we got the reputation for being a helpful church, we started getting more people talking, and then God started just putting things. Our church had already opened up some of our rooms. We had in 2019 purchased essentially it was a doctor's office. It was like a couple different doctor's practices in one, and that's a whole nother thing about how God helped bring that together. And but we were turning this building into a church and our mentality was, and a community center. We wanted this to be something that the community saw as a resource and an asset, and didn't sit empty for 6 days a week. So we had already taken some of the extra rooms that were available and made a clothing closet that people could come and get clothes. And then we had linked up with a great organization in our area called Cora, Chatham Outreach Alliance, that is a countywide food bank, and said they were looking for help covering this end of the county. And so it was just a couple just seemingly random conversations that led to us opening the closet and a pantry for people, and we started doing distributions every couple weeks. And then we were like, man, this is really gaining some steam, and we need more help than just our church. We're not necessarily a huge church, and it was always the goal to make it bigger than just one church, right? We're a very kingdom focused church. We build the kingdom and we let Jesus build our church however he sees fit. And so if we can do something and to partner with all these other denominations and all these other churches, I think there's 200 churches in our county. It's like, which is, not a lot but again, we don't have any big cities. It's just church everywhere, and we can all come together. And that's been the goal and the heart. And we've seen a little bit of that happen, where churches that are from different backgrounds have said, I don't care about our differences in theology necessarily. We can rally around what Jesus says to do for the Matthew 25:35 stuff about, you helped me, you fed me when I was hungry, you clothed me when I was naked, like those type of things we can all get behind. And so, but also the sheltering of people. There's no shelter. And so we saw a need. We said, wow, there's no shelter at all in Chatham County. We need to try to do something. And so we founded, we initially called it was really all about the homelessness at first. And we called ourselves the North Carolina. It was this really long acronym, but it was North Carolina, Chatham County, North Carolina Homeless Shelter or something, NCH, and we just decided to call it Love Chatham, because I was like, that's what we're doing. Because it was more than just about getting people under a roof. It was about meeting some of these other needs as well. And so, that's what led us to start that, was just, hey, there's a need here that's not being met, and we have a burden to do it. And so we saw that as God's invitation to get to work.
Wow. So in getting that started, what were the challenges on the way there?
There's a lot, more indifferent than we envisioned. We had, of course, I'm this pie in the sky type, but we're gonna set the gauntlet down, and people are gonna go, yeah, you're a genius. Let's go for it, And I think part of our challenge was convincing people to join us. I've been so thankful for the churches that have partnered with us. But I'm also so frustrated at the churches that haven't. The churches that give you lip service and say, oh, that's a great idea, I love what you're doing. And then I say, well, we need your help. We need volunteers. We need money. We need, even part of it was like, hey, I know people that abuse the system that will show up on this church doorstep and get their light bill paid, and that church doorstep, and play on our Christian desire to help. Why don't we be smart about this and put all of our money in the same pot and give people a chance to be holistically helped, and say, hey, we would love to help you. Here's the number for Love Chatham. This is how we participate in that. And then let us, through our partnerships with Salvation Army and United Way and all these other things, vet and be able to help somebody and make sure that they're not abusing this hard given and hard earned money. But a lot of churches just haven't participated. They'll share it on Facebook, and I'm thankful for that, but they won't necessarily show up in person. They won't be inconvenienced. And so I think that's been a big challenge, is finding the right mix of people that want to help for the right reasons. Again, that's not to speak. God has supernaturally brought relationships and friendships there, and maybe I just was having a high expectation. But we have just gotten a lot of no's, or a lot of, I'm going to talk to our deacons and we'll let you know, and then we never hear back. And then we find out that they actually have helped some of the same people just a little bit, but just in their own way, and I'm like, well, if we'd have known that you were helping them this way, we could help them in this other way, and that we could do this better. We could do this with wisdom. So that's been a challenge. And also balancing, I have the right way to put this. It's been difficult to balance what kind of help actually helps and what help doesn't. And Jesus doesn't put an asterisk by, or an asterisk around, feed the hungry, shelter the homeless. He says, do it. So there's a point where you can't go, well, do they deserve this, or we're not doing that. But it's hard sometimes when people can't get motivated, or there's something going on that they're not willing to. People will only let you help as much as they want you to, right. And even if they need it,
Yeah. Here in Chico, where I just moved to, uh, there's a lot of homeless like in town,
Mm-hmm,
and um, it's very disproportional to the population because it's a pretty small town.
mm-hmm.
And but the reason for it is that a few years ago there was a wildfire in the area, so
Oh,
the whole state rallied together around the wildfire and brought services to this area, and then a lot of homeless people came in to use those services, and they never left.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's
And that's part of you want to. That kind of speaks to because I think that can be the downside or the other side of the coin, and where we've gotten some pushback with town officials and different things. Like I remember going before the planning and zoning board talking about tiny houses. We had someone that was willing to give us some land or let us use some land to build some tiny houses, but we needed to get some zoning things figured out, and that I was shocked by the the spirit in the room changed, and they were like, well, that's if you build it they will come, and you're just asking for it, you're just and there was this idea that if we had good robust homeless care, more homeless people would show up, and they didn't want that. They're like, we it was they didn't say they wouldn't say the quiet part out loud, but it was like, we would rather have a couple that aren't really being helped than to help them and then let the word spread, and all of a sudden our town is the place that the homeless folks go. And there's some validity to that. I don't like the spirit behind it, and I think ultimately you get over that and you help people. That's not an excuse to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But we've seen it. We've seen people call and our hotline, and we're like, "Where are you?" And they're like, "Oh, well, they're hour and a half away, but we can come there." And we're like, "Well, we're doing good to provide for the people that are here right now. So if we have a place, then it's the field of dreams. If you build it, they'll come." But also, I think of the scripture: bring me your homeless, bring me your needy, bring me bring me those things, bring me those needs, and we'll meet them. That's uh, we have to kind of count the cost and be ready, but
yeah,
uh, what it is not worth it to me. It's worth it to me to have to deal with some of that or help some people, because I was really, for a long time, I didn't like, because there were a couple people that did me wrong when I tried to help them. There was a couple times I remember when, like, my wife was in college and we tried to help somebody that had the cup out and had the sign up and stuff, and it says hungry, please, anything helps. And so she went to the McDonald's and got him a couple burgers and some fries and a drink, and he like threw it back in her face and said, "I want money. I don't need this." And she's and that, like, well, both of us were like, well, psh. And it kind of colored our ideas of what it meant to help people for a while. But then we realized, you're going to have some of that. You're going to have some people that you can't help. You're going to have some people that will abuse your help. But it, who you do help, the people you actually do reach, that's worth it. It's
right.
you got to sift through that. You got to eat your broccoli to get to dessert. I guess I don't know if that's a
Yeah,
good analogy, but
yeah. So, were you guys? Did you guys end up being able to build the tiny houses?
still work in progress. We kind of got stuck. So interesting thing is, for a while we kind of had to put the housing part on pause. We ended up just getting some good grants and donations, and we're able to keep some people in the local motels.
Mm,
That was sort of been the kind of the de facto homeless shelters. And so for a year or two, we just had a budget of, and we tried to help as many people as we could by getting them, a week or two in a hotel or something like that until they got things figured out. And
mm,
if we had some casework going on, if there was an end in sight, we would maybe extend their stay a little bit. But we normally, it was like a week or two at most. And if you don't have a plan, we're not an endless stream of money, because
right.
the costs of that kept going up and kept going up. But um, we're starting to think about how can we do this? All right, the tiny house thing isn't working right now because we don't have a place to put it, and we have to figure out is there a place that we don't have to deal with ordinances and stuff like that? And so we ended up, there was someone in our congregation that was just down the road from our church building that knew what we were up to and said, "Hey, I don't need that much for this house. I've got another house I'm building. This is paid for, and I do need some money for it, but I will owner finance because we don't have to worry about a bank, and which is owner financing was how we were able to secure the church too. Having a church building where the owners were like, we see that you want to use this for good, so we're gonna make this a little easier for you. And so the same thing with that house. And so just down the block, this year we've bought this house. I mean, begun the process of buying the house that will let us serve. I think we could get 6 different families in there, or 6 different rooms with the. Right now we're designated them for single moms with kids, and so we're able to house up to like 6 or 7 moms and kids in a house for what we would spend a month, what we would spend on one hotel room. And so that's automatically like magnifying and amplifying and multiplying what we can do with our money, because we got some great what we were doing in these other areas caught the attention of, and this is kind of there's a preachable thing, there's a teachable moment in here, because we hit a brick wall with the tiny houses, and we said, all right, well, we're just going to do what we're able to do. Let's take the doors that God has opened for us. And so we continued with the food and the pantry, or the closet, and we continued with the hotels, and we ended up getting a very generous grant from United Way, a grant from the county, and as we were getting the house thing put together, now the county has funded a house manager position, because that was one of the things we're going, how we can't just open up this house and let people stay in there and not have not have some order in a program. And so having that, and then in the process, so this was cool because I was like, this is not really how we had envisioned it, but I'm going to go with it anyway. And we bought the house, and we started getting it ready. And at that same time, a builder, like a regional home builder, I guess had heard about us through county, through United Way, through these other, because again, we've worked hard to not be a silo, right? That we worked very hard to go, okay, who else is doing this in this area? How can we partner? How can we be smart and not overlap? And because we probably deal with the same people. And so through that network of relationships, this building company approached us and said, and they have Christian owners, and they have a sort of they tithe off of their houses to say, in an area, if we're going to make X amount of houses, we're going to build X amount of houses for a good cause for the community. And they said, could we build you a house? And we're like, well, yeah, absolutely. And they said, well, we just need a place to put it. And so we used our county connections there, and we're able to find a lot. So they're in the process now of building a 4,000 square foot house in the town seat, or I mean the county seat, the city where there's not quite as much need, but it's not too far that we can't make use of it. And so it was just, so now we're going to go from having nothing to hopefully by the end of the year we'll have 2 functional transitional houses that we can we still may have to use hotels, or like this winter we're doing a when it gets cold enough, we're doing like a white flag emergency shelter where we just put cots out at the church. And but that's the first step. But then for the ones that have, there's a possibility for them to keep going with some help, we'll put them in the transitional house, and we haven't had to spend that much money at all, considering. So it's pretty cool.
That's amazing how God is blessing that ministry.
Oh, it's what God has done through Love Chatham has reminded me that we got to let him work things out. We got to let him. We can have our own ideas, and it's cool because doing this has built our. I was at the time that Love Chatham was starting, I was concerned about our church. Our church wasn't growing like I thought it should be growing. Our church, we're in that kind of doldrums of transitioning from new and exciting to, okay, this is the church now, and doing Love Chatham, having our people get on board with this, and has built the church. Now there's an excitement and a buzz about our church family that has come from all the good work, partly, that we're doing in the community. And so now they're going, oh, we can get biblical teaching and worship and community, and also we can be a part of what God is doing in these very tangible ways. We're loading people's cars with food. We're giving them bags of clothes. We're bringing them in out of the cold, and it really lights a fire under the and amplifies the Spirit, the Holy Spirit that's in us, because God loves that stuff. That's what He tells us to do. And so it's by spending less time on the church, funny enough, the church has prospered too. But it's just from God doing it. All the biggest things that have happened with Love Chatham have just been us getting out of the way and letting Him build it for us.
Okay. So, as like a church planner, what has been some of your like biggest takeaways for like if you were to do it again?
Great question. I think hold very loosely to the details, but very firmly to the main things, right? Like, I remember, daydreaming. My prayers would turn into daydreams about what a church would look like, and God gave me all sorts of opinions. That's how I knew God was beginning to put that in me, because my prayer times would turn into these ideas of what a church should look like, and I felt mutinous almost, because I was like, oh, but my pastor's my best friend, and I don't want to like not, I'm his Robin, he's the Batman, but then it was funny, because not long after that began, he came to me and said, I feel like God's putting it on us to plant a church, and I think you should be the pastor. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Okay. Ooh, I feel better, because he's doing that to me too. And let's confirm that. But I had a lot of ideas about what a church should look like, and it's very different in the window dressing of it. And you have to be absolutely steadfast in your culture, in the things the things are God's callings. His I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of like rhema versus logos, a word from God, right? Like when this has kind of become shorthand in our churches, we'll say that's my rhema, which means that's what God is telling me to do. Might not necessarily be telling you to do that, but God's rhema for the rich young ruler was sell everything that you had. But that doesn't mean He told every single person to sell everything they had and follow Him. That was just what that guy needed. And so there are rhemas that God will give you as a church planter that are just as important as to obey than the logos, the universal truth, the universal word from God. And so having a firm conviction of those things while holding the rest of those details that maybe don't matter as much very loosely, because it will change, it will be different. But if you get the main things right and hold to those main things, even when it's hard, even when it loses people, even when people want to leave you and you feel like you're the only one in the room now, holding to those things that are good and right and true, and that God's calling you to do, even if it looks different. That's so important. So that's one thing. I think also I was terrified of losing people. I'm a people person. I love relationships. I love friendships. I could talk to the hole in the wall there, and we'd become lifelong friends. But I especially in a church planning situation where you're establishing yourself and your leadership, it's really easy to seek validation with butts and seats. Because there is something, you want people there. You want the ministry to grow. You want people to hear about Jesus. You want to see this community happen. But it's one of the many. I love Brady Shearer from Church Pro Tools or Church Media. He always says, like, that's just one of the metrics for church success. It's part of it, but it's not everything. And so for a while there, the church ebbed and flowed, and how I thought the church was going was dependent on if people showed up. And then there were times where I was called to the mat and had to defend or stand fast on something, or I had to do church discipline, or and shepherd the flock, and knowing that it would mean that maybe a person who has been with me from the beginning, or maybe someone who tithes well, would leave. And I had to, the times that I gave in, it ended up being, it ended up biting me in the rear. It ended up making it worse. But the moments where I would stand fast, it really helped our church kind of. It wasn't fun for the moment. It was, the attendance would dip, or the X, Y, and Z would happen, but we stayed firm to those rhemas. We stayed, that we didn't let them dangle the tithe check over my head and say, if you don't do it my way, then I'm out of here. We'd say, all right, well, have a good, praying for you, love you, see you later. And I think so. Learning as a church planter that while you want to reach everyone, not everyone is meant for you. Not everyone is meant for your leadership. Not everyone is meant for your fellowship. And the blessing of the pastors jokingly call it blessed subtraction, right? People that you that you love, that maybe are a thorn in your side, and you do everything you know how to do to love them. You don't necessarily run them off. I couldn't bring myself to run them off. I'd have pastors go, you just need to run them off. They're just, and I'm like, I just can't do that. But I was going to play, I'm fine playing chicken with them, and saying, no, I'm greater is he that is telling me to do this than the flesh that is compelling you. So, go right ahead. And, we've seen time after time, God be faithful to that the moments I compromised on God's calling, it ended up being worse off than before, worse than what we feared. And so, so if you're a church planter, it's like, find your people. Not everybody's your people, and that's okay, because there are some people that will show up, and I don't want to get too new agey, but like their spirit like messes up the mojo, right? The spirit in the room can take a hit with the scowl on their face, or the biting comment that they have, and so we are now at a point. I'm sure this is a very brief season where, and I'm sure there'll be more that I have to do that to at some point, but we're in a season in our church where all the Jezebels, all the Ahabs, all the ones with ulterior motives, they realized they weren't getting what they wanted, and so they left. And it's better for our church, and we love them, and we hope that they don't have that type of spirit at the next church, and maybe it's another church that agrees more with them that they can have a fellowship with, and that's great. But I'm called to reach the people that God's called us to reach. And so being I'm sorry I'm ranting, but this is something I love to talk about, is like being who God has called you to be unapologetically, and not trying to bend over backwards for people's preferences, right? If you're going to bend over backwards for people, it's to love them and to serve them, but not to appeal to a mature believer's preferences, and not offend their sensibilities or their, it's like, there's somebody you should bend over backwards for. It's the people that are baby Christians that need a little help being discipled. So even all in the face of all that, there's all sorts of doubts. There's all sorts of, I think too, for church planners, face those doubts, and go forward trying to, putting it ultimately in God's hands. I know that's that sounds like a cliche thing, but it's like, if this doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. God will make lemonade out of our lemons if we let him. So if, how success for a church and failure for a church may not be what we think it is, and this may be a training. Or we had a campus, or a church plant of ours that went before us that many would call it failed, but we learned so much from that. And yeah, there were things we could have done better, but and maybe this is selfish of me, but I paid a lot of attention to what they did wrong, so I made sure I didn't do that. And so, and one of the things, by the way, that we've seen, and if I had to do over again, I might have more what you would call top tier leadership in place. Not in a value sense, right? Everybody is equal in the kingdom's eyes, in the kingdom economy, but having not just I think instead of doing 2 churches in 2 years like we did, if we would have done 1 church and had 2 elders and their families and be able to handle the preaching responsibilities like that, and having and spreading the weight around a little bit and not trying to Superman it and just have it on the shoulders of one person, I think is a vital thing. Don't be afraid to go it alone, but be praying for, and if you have it at your disposal, don't just send one person off, send a group of people off. I was fortunate. I think what helped our church in the beginning was I was going back to an area I had grown up in, where the pastor of our first church plant, his wife was known around there, but he was an outsider, and they didn't have a lot of leadership in place, and he was so desperate for help that he elevated people to leadership that weren't ready. We're in year 6 now, coming up on our 7th anniversary in the fall, and we just now ordained another elder. And it wasn't because I was power hungry or because I didn't trust anybody, but there were good candidates, but that's a big undertaking. And so putting leadership on someone that's not ready is bad for, the Bible says don't do that too early. That's bad for them. But going out with a couple, if you have a couple, if you have a couple leaders, a couple families working together to get through those down moments and those valleys, really will help you as a church planner as well.
Okay. Now, can you explain something for me? So, for what denomination are you?
We are non-denominational. I grew up Baptist and also sort of Methodist and also sort of Lutheran and church. I'm a denominational mutt.
Yeah.
We did partner with a local Baptist group for a while that was just big into church planning, and that's where we sent some of our money. We weren't
Okay.
necessarily funded by them. We just liked the idea of planting churches, and they were doing it. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, we're technically non-denominational.
Okay. So, what I'm getting at is, so how does elders work within your church?
Good question. Elder, we have, and I've done things just a tad different from our mothership, but at the we are elder ruled and deacon served, and so we have elders and deacons. We're pretty. We have ministry leaders, but we definitely let the leaders lead. So we're not versus congregational rule. They congregations vote on the color of the carpet sometimes. I grew up Baptist where they had a committee to choose the committees. Like it was very it was a very American democratic idea, but it wasn't very biblical. And so we just looked to Scripture and said, I don't care what other denominations are doing. Let's get alone with the Bible and some wise men and figure this out. And so we have elders and overseers that are in our church particularly. The elder team would nominate an elder that keeps is in line with the Timothy, first, second Timothy, or the Titus, qualifications of an elder, and then in my church specifically, we just did this. We vote to confirm or deny. So I say here's the candidate for elder. The elder, and in the future, our elder team will say here's the candidate for eldership. You as the congregation confirm or deny that. And so we have those elders, but then we also have deacons, which are appointed by the elders that are, leaders in service. And so they're men and women who usually are the spearhead of specific ministries under the care of the elder team. And so we had a team of elders for the first few years. And then when we sort of broke off in 2021 and became our own organization, knowing that I was the only elder, I was going, ooh, I don't love that because of just what the devil can do with that. So we have I call them an accountability board
Mm,
that gets activated when there's not a plurality of elders.
mm,
And so we have other pastors that are in the community that don't have a stake in our church, don't have an ulterior motive at all.
mm,
And they will when people join our church, I say, right now I'm the only elder, and so it ends with me. But the decision lays in my lap because the responsibility is mine, to God. But also, if I need to get taken out, if I start preaching some type of whack, heresy, or abusive things, go to this board and they will remove me, or they because they're fair-minded, they love the king, they love me, but they also love the kingdom.
mm,
And so now that we have another elder that we have just voted in, they'll be the tiebreaker if we
mm,
can't come to a quorum of that. But
mm,
our elders, we very much let lead, and that turns some people off
mm,
because they want to tell me that I had one lady who grew up in the Baptist church, and she had that sort of critical spirit. She's like, "Who chose the paint on these walls?" And I'm like, "Well, guess what? Don't worry about it." Like, far too many church congregants are wrapped up trying to figure out things about the church and they don't have time to minister to people. They don't have time to make disciples. And so we run the elders do the things that elders in the Bible are called to do, and deacons do the things deacons are called to do, and that frees up the congregation to uh, not even have to worry about that stuff. And I've
mm,
had so many people that grew up in those traditional churches that go, "Man, our business meetings are a blessing. We have like one a year. We voted to ratify the paperwork, for the bylaws and stuff officially.
mm,
Um, and then the only other thing we voted on is to put in an elder, and we just let
mm.
the elders do what they're called to do because it's their responsibility. And
Yeah.
so that's been different than what I'm used to. But
Mm,
when you get the right people in there and you have a good mix of accountability, and again, realizing that not everybody likes that. Some people want to have a say in how much money the youth group gets or how much, and we just say, I love you, but no, you don't, you're not in a position. God has called us to lead, and we're going to let the leaders lead. And
mm,
if an elder does it right, and if an elder is not abusive and leads as biblically as they know how, that
mm,
ends up being a good thing for the congregation. And so what you're left with is members who are thankful of
mm,
strong leadership and strong elder headship, versus the ones that are going, yeah, they're just in control. They're just, um, but it's better for the whole. I've seen
mm.
from what I've seen.
Okay. So, uh, one of my last questions here is,
Okay.
what is your outlook for the future ministry
Like in our church in particular, or just
for you?
overall? For me, well,
Yeah.
I'm in an interesting kind of transition here because one of the things God's impressed upon me is how I need to divest. I can't
Mm,
do everything myself, and will never grow if I'm doing everything myself. That's been kind of one of those things. I just take it on myself, and a lot of pastors do this. And if I don't start giving away ministry, then the potential impact for the church is lessened. And so I'm
mm,
in a season of giving away. God has finally answered some prayers on mature Christians who, by the way, if someone tells you they're a mature believer, right, like if you don't have to invite that out of them, they're like, I'm a mature believer. I'm like, are you? And there's a lot of people that say, I want to help, I want to be an elder, I want to be this, I want to be that, and then you find out they're churchy, but they're not necessarily mature,
mm,
because a mature person, serves before they get recognized. A mature believer does these things without having to have recognition. But I finally
mm,
got some people that have either grown into maturity or God has sent to our church to be able to start passing off some of these responsibilities. And so my hope is that I can still have a good influence and effect on stuff like Love Chatham as an organization, or some of these other things in the church. My own DJ business, I had a long time friend who worked with me, under me, and sort of was my protege, that is now doing a wonderful job of running the business. So I'm less involved with that than I ever. And so my hope is to be the guy that helps that helps where I'm needed, but I can focus on the shepherding of the flock in a way I've never been able to. I've always worked a second job. I've been a teacher. I've been I've run the DJ company. I've ran all these other things at the same time, and so I'm looking forward to having the ability to really study God's word in a way that I never have. Right. Like, I've been studying it for 15 years, don't get me wrong, but like, there's so many ideas that have gone, and so many interests, and so many of these things that have gone, I don't have time for that. I got to preach a sermon for now, or I've got to do for now. And having time now to think more deeply about some of these things and how we teach things as a church, I think I'm hoping to be able to bring up our level of discipleship in the church. We've got our charitable wing, or we've gotten the part of our body that is meeting needs. We're starting to get to where we have enough leadership underneath that can be the pastors of their life groups, that can pastor their youth. We got a youth group now that the elder that we just voted on is the youth pastor too, and so he's pastoring them in a way that hasn't happened before. And so now that we've planted these seeds, now we're tending it, right? And so I think I'm hoping to use that motif, to go from seed planting, which is what I felt like I've been doing my whole adult life, starting things from scratch. I was joking with my wife about how I'd love to just not have to get something on the ground, ex nihilo or whatever. Like, I'd love to be able to just sit in and enjoy the fruits of that. So I'm hoping to move out of the seed planting phase and into the tending and the watering phase, where our church comes into its own. Love Chatham solidifies itself in the community as a parachurch and really just kingdom building organization. And that, because also I'm able to make sure I don't miss pastoring and building the kingdom within my own household. I went from having 3 kids to 5 in the past couple years, and so being a dad, being the type of father that raises kids that don't hate the church, that are not that have a dad that's there for them, and have a wife or a husband is there for them and is not leaving that all on her doorstep to deal with. That's my goal, and that's my desire, and to finally see God continue to use the things that He planted years ago to build His kingdom in the future. So that's where I want to be.
Okay. So last 2 questions. Is there any books that you recommend?
For a church planter, or just in general?
For church planners, or for people looking to start nonprofits.
There's a couple books that have been really formative. Erwin McManus wrote a book. What's the name of it? Hold on, I have it right here. Hold on a second, I'll show you. Unstoppable Force, by Erwin McManus. This is daring to become the church God had in mind. Now, you might not agree. I don't know if I necessarily agree with everything that Erwin McManus says in general, but man, this book hits a home run about establishing culture and an ethos in your church. That was very formative to me. Letters to the Church, Francis Chan, has really, even though we're not a house church like he is a house church network, his thoughts on and his transition from being a megachurch pastor to what he's doing now, I think is a beautiful thing to read about, and that book is very challenging. Simple Church is a book that has helped us, which I'm trying to think the author of that. I've got that over there on the bookshelf too, but has been formative for years, even when I was just in youth ministry, about it's a structure. encourages a structure of life groups or small groups or community groups, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
as the vehicle to do all the good things the church has to do to keep things simple, right? So
Mhm.
that someone's not at church 6 days a week and they don't have time to love their neighbor. So it's good. That was a very practical shift that my mentor got about, I don't know, 5-6 years after I did. I came in one time to an elder meeting and slapped this book down and said, "Man, this is it. We need to do." And all three of the other elders in the room were like, "Oh, okay." Like, I'm the young guy. I'm the yeah hothead. And then I just last year or a year or two ago, that pastor was like, "Man, I've got this book you need to read. It's called Simple Church." I'm like, "Yeah, I've been trying to say that for I don't know how long." so so I was like, "Vindication, all right." So Simple Church has been really good for us. Obviously, Experiencing God by Henry and Richard Blackaby, that helped for nonprofits. Chess Not Checkers was a good book as well. I can't think of the author of that at the time. Might be Drew Dick or somebody like that. But Chess Not Checkers is really good for leadership. And we had connecting our not the nonprofit part of it is a whole different animal almost than churches. And so you need to, if you're doing a nonprofit and doing the whole 501c3 thing, there's a lot of resources out there that help you organizationally, and you need to find someone. This is not in a book, but you find someone who loves that type of organizational stuff, who has that administrative gift that they can because that's not me. I'm the big picture guy. And so, but we had people that filed the paperwork for the 501c3, and they file the tax returns, and taxes and all that stuff gets really, you got to cover those bases though. Doing a
Mhm.
nonprofit is different from a church. And so you have to maybe check some different boxes and be a little more thorough with
Mhm.
a 501c3 than you would a religious organization. So,
Mhm.
so that's good. Let me see if there's any more that pop up here. Um, the Bible, that's a good one. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, um, yeah. I mean, there's a ton of good books, but those are some of the ones that have practically helped me. And obviously, and again, I don't agree with everything he says either, but I still find myself formed by purpose-driven life. Rick Warren back in the day. I like him more than a lot of my friends do, and I like him less than other parts of my friends do. But I that book, like when I read that right soon after I got saved, and has the whole idea of we exist for his purpose, and being purpose driven in everything that we do, has it carries over. That's maybe more of a personal side of it, but it affects how you run an organization as well. We don't want to lose focus of that purpose while we're trying to accomplish these other things either.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you for coming on to the
Yeah.
podcast. And if people want to connect to your church or you or
hmm
Love Chatham, how do they reach out?
Well, we have a couple different places. Our church website is lovesiler.com because we're in Siler City, North Carolina. So the church website is lovesiler.com. That gets you to sermons, that gets you to podcasts, that gets you to whatever, and our social presence, and eventually me. So if you want to connect that way, we'd love to. I also lovechatham.org. Lovechatham.org is the website for Love Chatham. We're again based in Chatham County, North Carolina, and we minister to the folks here. But we anytime that people want to talk, uh, I would love to see Love Chathams all over the place. And so this idea of bringing churches together to work together, I've seen it work, and it's wonderful. So any way we can help with that, Love Chatham. And of course, we have a decently active Facebook page and stuff that posts things that we're up to, and so you can do that as well. And then I'm not currently at the moment. I've been putting some things together, but hope that within the next few months to start back my own podcast. I podcasted for a while. I did like a devotional style podcast.
Mhm.
It's called Amen, Brother Ben, and so it's amenben.com. Real simple website, amenben.com. That gets you to the podcast, and we will reignite that. We're sort of coming in with a 2.0 version of it that will look a little differently once we get some things set up. But that'll be the podcast too that we try to make it more. I try to talk about topics that are more relevant to everybody and not just our local context. So that will be one way to get with me as well.
All right. Well, thank you.
Elliott, man, I appreciate it. And you let me know if you need anything. I'd love to talk to you and keep doing what you're doing, man. I saw the posting and got to look at what you're up to, and I'm excited to see that go. And so I'll be keeping up with you as well, brother. We appreciate you.
Well, thanks. All right.
Have a good one.